In the early morning hours of February 17, 2026, Buckingham Palace was buzzing with tension as Prince William, flanked by Princess Anne and the Duchess of Edinburgh, addressed the press with a gravity that seemed to reverberate through every stone of the historic walls. He announced that the marriage settlement between Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, signed 2 days earlier on February 15th, was now officially binding. The announcement carried weight far beyond legal formalities. This was a decision with irreversible consequences for the monarchy and the children at the heart of the dispute. The Crown had acted decisively, in accordance with centuries of duty, to protect its lineage, preserve the stability of the institution, and secure the future of its youngest members. The settlement was final. Prince William's words marked the end of a battle that had been waged quietly behind palace doors for years, but had long since spilled into the public eye. The path to this moment had been neither swift nor uncontested, and the turning point had come on the morning of February 3, 2026, when Princess Anne presented the now infamous Markle withdrawal file in an emergency session with King Charles and Prince William at Windsor Castle. The file revealed shocking breaches of protocol. Archie, 7, and Lilette, 5, had been withdrawn from their California schools without notice. Medical appointments were blocked, communication with royal child welfare officers had been severed, and Meghan had authorised the dissolution of a £6.3 million education trust in the United Kingdom meant for the children's long-term welfare. Anne described the evidence as a deliberate and structured pattern of disengagement, a consistent series of actions that threatened the children's stability and well-being. By the next day, February 4th, the Duchess of Edinburgh, Sophie, was given authorisation to implement the Royal Emergency Guardianship Protocol, a legal mechanism last used during the post-war succession crises of the 1950s. On February 5th, Prince William invoked Appendix 4 of the Royal Succession Stabilisation Act, a historic clause dating back to the Edward VIII abdication era. This move granted the Crown full custodial control over royal minors when faced with existential threats or potential erasure of identity. Meghan Markle did not attend any of these proceedings, and her legal team filed no challenge. According to sources close to Palisades, her silence spoke louder than any courtroom opposition could. The February 15th agreement, signed under intense legal observation at the Royal Family Court of Chancery, covered every facet of the royal and financial relationship, from the division of joint assets, including properties in Montecito and Norfolk Holdings, to stock accounts and liabilities tied to Arch Well. The agreement granted the Crown permanent legal guardianship of Archie and Lilette, while also defining the financial obligations of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, including child support, educational funding, and the management of personal and premarital assets. Ownership of heirlooms, inheritances, and intellectual property were also clarified, alongside residential arrangements and transitional housing, public conduct expectations, and confidentiality clauses, complete with non-disparagement mandates and penalties for breach. While the legal provisions were decisive, Palace insiders emphasised that the emotional and psychological consequences would linger long after the ink had dried. A source close to Queen Camilla, who chose to remain behind the public spotlight, confided that while she felt profound sadness over the proceedings, there was also a sense of relief now that the terms had been finalised. Prince Harry, in the weeks leading up to the signing, was described as deeply fractured, vacillating between guilt, confusion, and bouts of withdrawal without Meghan's presence in the UK. He oscillated between resistance and surrender, ultimately conceding to the Crown's constitutional position after being denied interim custody due to his unstable residency and inconsistent income. Meanwhile, Princess Catherine was photographed leaving St George's Chapel on February 10th, hand in hand with Lilette and Charlotte, a quiet, symbolic gesture of transition. The uncaptioned photograph sparked a surge of public sympathy and admiration, with media outlets hailing it as the moment when dignity eclipsed dysfunction. The official public release of the settlement came after the customary 48-hour constitutional waiting period, at exactly 9 a.m. on February 17th. Buckingham Palace uploaded the announcement to its official channel, and within minutes, Headlines across both sides of the Atlantic captured the gravity of the decision. The Times declared that royal guardianship had secured Meghan's relinquishment of all rights. The Telegraph framed it as the resolution of a custody crisis under royal doctrine. The New York Post heralded it as the final exit. Yet, hidden within the dense legal framework of the 17-clause agreement, tensions lingered. Meghan had refused to sign Clause 11, which permanently banned the commercial use of the children's names and images. Palace insiders confirmed that this clause remained suspended and under review. While Prince William stood at the forefront of the announcement, it was Princess Anne who had set the tone behind the scenes. Her words to royal aides, later leaked anonymously, captured the institutional ethos. "We did not ask for this battle, but once it threatened the children, it became our responsibility to win it." The monarchy, battered yet intact, had closed a chapter that tested the limits of duty, both constitutional and emotional. The world watching in real time understood one truth. This was no ordinary divorce. It was a royal reset, signed, sealed, and sovereign. The confidential dissolution agreement, drafted by a coalition of Crown legal advisers, Privy Council representatives, and outside family law experts, spanned 94 pages across 6 annexes and employed a rare legal construct known internally as a dual-frame writ. This framework separates domestic civil law from Crown fiduciary protections, a mechanism not invoked since Edward III's abdication settlement. At its core lay Clause 14C, media exploitation and identity licensing, which forbids either party from using the likeness, name, voice, or visual representations of Archie or Lilette in monetized formats, including broadcasts, merchandise, artificial intelligence models, or dramatizations, without written approval from the Office of Royal Protections. The clause is global, irreversible, and enforceable through transnational copyright watchdogs. Meghan's refusal to sign Clause 14C became the pivotal moment that destabilized the settlement. Sources at Gray's Inn reported that she insisted on retaining future brand integration rights, particularly regarding Lilette's likeness, which had been modelled into early-stage concept art for a proposed children's book series titled Lily. Royal advisers interpreted this insistence as a breach of custodial neutrality, emphasising that Clause 14C was about psychological protection rather than profit. Dame Rosalind Hurst, former Crown Family Law Chair, explained, "The monarchy knows too well the trauma that comes when a child becomes intellectual property. Clause 7, Heritage Access, explicitly restricts any request by Meghan or her representatives to enter royal estates, royal cemeteries, or Crown-funded institutions under the guise of ancestry, tradition, or symbolic continuity." A senior Whitehall archivist described it as a royal erasure clause. It not only denies access, but prevents any attempt to influence or interpret royal heritage, charitable dedications, or commemorative events. Appendix 3, the Custodial Compensation Framework, specifies that all child-rearing costs, including education, healthcare, and housing, will be fully covered by the Crown, but only if Archie and Lilette reside full-time in UK-approved institutions or residences under royal guardianship protocols. California residences and affiliate properties are explicitly disqualified. Critics argue that this provision effectively forces Prince Harry to choose between abandoning California custody or forgoing all Crown financial support. Palisades maintains that the clause is a direct defence against transatlantic exploitation and unverified third-party access, representing an unprecedented protective measure. Appendix 4 requires biometric registration of the children's images in a secured vault at Sandringham Archives to prevent misuse in advertising, film, or AI training models. Reports suggest this provision was triggered by rumours that unreleased childhood images had already been sold through unauthorised channels to Hollywood production houses. The settlement also retroactively nullifies prior subsidies given to Harry and Meghan since 2020, converting them into callable debts under the Royal Privilege Reimbursement Statute. Security expenditures, property renovations, including Frogmore Cottage, and legal deferrals were reclassified as misappropriated institutional funds. Any attempt by Meghan to contest these debts in foreign courts could activate Writ 7Z, a diplomatic tool allowing the Crown to engage in reputation-protecting filings abroad. Section 12, Narrative Freeze Bans, prohibits any interviews, memoirs, documentaries, or podcasts referencing the children's conception, birth, baptism, or family holidays without explicit palace approval. Violations trigger automatic injunctions and asset holds on any affiliated agents, publishers, or production companies. This clause appears to be a direct response to Meghan's unreleased memoir, Mother of Grace, which reportedly included passages portraying her as the sole architect of modern royal motherhood. The project has now been shelved indefinitely, according to Spotify sources. Multiple royal aides who witnessed Harry's February 15th signing described him as numb, hollow, yet cooperative in a chilling display of compliance. As Prince Harry was handed the pen to initial a paragraph confirming he would no longer be the primary decision-maker for his children's education, healthcare, or residence, he reportedly muttered under his breath, "If this spares them, I'll vanish myself behind the legalese." Those words, whispered in the hushed corridors of the royal family court, captured the depth of fracture revealed in the February 15th settlement. At its core, the monarchy had reached an unflinching conclusion. The Markle brand posed not merely a reputational risk, but a strategic threat to the continuity of the institution itself, a threat crystallized in legalese as the clock struck midnight on that fateful day. News of Clause 7, buried deep within the documents, sent a ripple of disbelief across Britain's legal and royal circles. Initially cryptic to the public, the clause would soon emerge as one of the most potent instruments of control ever embedded in a marital contract involving a senior royal. Fragments of the provision, unsealed during a confidential inquiry led by the Lord Chancellor's office, revealed that Meghan Markle had, in 2018, embedded a clause within her marriage contract that granted her exclusive rights over Prince Harry's intellectual property, voice, unpublished memoirs, and narrative derivatives relating to their joint life from 2016 onward. This included, critically, rights connected to their Sussex exit from royal duties in 2020. Legal analysts describe the clause as audacious, aggressive, and unprecedented. Sir Malcolm Weatherby, former Queen's Counsel, said, "It's the most aggressive narrative control clause I have seen in any contract involving public figures. By signing, Harry surrendered control of his past, present, and future in exchange for marital unity and perhaps emotional safety." The revelation sent shockwaves through the palace and media conglomerates alike. Suddenly, lucrative deals that once appeared joint, Netflix specials, Spotify projects, and upcoming memoirs, were reinterpreted as one-sided curations, filtered entirely through Meghan's authority. The narrative of the Sussex legacy was no longer collaborative. It was now subject to Meghan's exclusive oversight. Lady Louise Windsor, who co-authored the internal investigative summary for the Privy Council, confirmed in private testimony that the clause had never been disclosed to senior royals. Neither Prince Charles at the time nor the late Queen Elizabeth were made aware of its existence during the wedding proceedings. She stated plainly that had they known, it was unlikely any ceremonial recognition of the Sussex union would have proceeded as it did. Meghan had insisted on American legal jurisdiction for all narrative disputes, a move that now left the royal family scrambling to reclaim control over decades of institutional storytelling. Royal historians had long relied on meticulously regulated memoirs, letters, and archives preserved within the Windsor Archive. But if Meghan's interpretation of Clause 7 held in court, entire chapters of Harry's life, from his childhood traumas to his military service and personal reflections on his mother Diana, could now be commercially packaged without oversight. The legal phrase, granting an exclusive license to monetize and curate his narrative, might appear clinical, but the ramifications were staggering. Harry had effectively authorized Meghan to become his publisher, producer, and biographer, with no obligation to consult him on future projects. Kensington Palace insiders revealed that Prince William was visibly shaken upon reading the unsealed documents. According to one source close to the Prince of Wales, it wasn't merely betrayal, it was premeditated, codified, and sealed in legalese. Queen Camilla, long silent on the Sussex issue, allegedly responded with a single, haunting line. Upon understanding the scope of the clause, she wanted his story, not the man. The ramifications were not purely emotional. Buckingham Palace's media team, already tasked with countering negative Sussex narratives, now faced the unsettling possibility that future documentaries, podcasts, or dramatised series involving Harry could fall under Meghan's exclusive purview. Public trust within royal circles began to fray. Conservative MP Alden Brockhurst called for an emergency legislative review, declaring that the Crown must never again be undermined by an offshore clause drafted in Malibu. What exacerbated the crisis further was Harry's apparent silence. To this point, he had not disavowed the clause or attempted to revoke it. Clarence House sources suggested he may not have fully grasped the breadth of what he had signed. He was in love, grieving, and, as one senior aide put it, he signed away the very thing his mother died fighting to protect, the autonomy of her children. Meanwhile, Meghan's legal team issued a defiant statement on February 16th, asserting that the agreement was mutually approved, mutually signed, and legally binding, and that any attempt to retroactively nullify it would violate US civil code and marital sovereignty. The timing of the revelation was anything but accidental. Meghan's upcoming memoir, reportedly titled Despair's Crown, was set for release in April. If Clause 7 remained intact, the book could include explosive chapters containing unreleased royal family conversations, private grief counselling notes, and even classified details from funeral preparations following Queen Elizabeth's passing. Princess Anne, reportedly incensed during a closed-door Privy Council meeting, demanded immediate countermeasures, denouncing Harry's signature as a breach of sovereign trust. Lady Louise echoed her aunt's outrage, warning that failure to act would result in the Windsor legacy being serialised, commercialised, and weaponized. But the family's next move, she insisted, would not be legal. It would be deeply personal and irrevocably public. By February 16, 2026, the full scale of Harry and Meghan's financial decline had become undeniable. Months of carefully curated social media appearances and brand extensions had masked a growing crisis. Montecito property filings revealed impending foreclosure linked to a $9.4 million bridge loan taken in mid-2025 through a Delaware holding entity later tied to a now-defunct Dubai media syndicate. The loan carried a staggering 1,420.5% interest rate with zero flexibility, warning of immediate lien exposure if missed. Meghan quietly attempted to negotiate refinancing with a boutique Manhattan lender specializing in distressed celebrity portfolios, but auditors raised red flags over Archwell Foundation's expense allocations, particularly PR retainers and security reimbursements disguised as charitable expenditures. Within 72 hours, the deal collapsed. Public perception shifted overnight. What had been interpreted as creative resilience now appeared as financial recklessness. Archie and Lillette were moved from a premium Brentwood school to a lower-cost Montessori program. Meghan's wardrobe shifted subtly from couture to minimal, repurposed pieces, a choice her stylists described as sustainable, but one the media read as a sign of constraint. The couple's proposed follow-up Netflix docu-series centered on Meghan's healing and Harry's ancestral reckoning was permanently shelved due to low audience retention and reputational concerns, cancelling a 5-project pipeline once valued at $40 million. King Charles and Prince William had anticipated this moment. Palace advisors had activated a containment protocol as early as January 20th, after SEC filings linked to Archewell's US partner entities raised alarms. The Crown preemptively blocked Harry from leveraging Highgrove House, Sandringham visuals, or any royal trademarks in future media, an unprecedented move in modern history. Princess Anne, ever the silent sentinel, issued a veiled public statement at the Royal Maritime College. Clarity of purpose protects legacy, grants immunity from responsibility only. It was a final warning shot, both moral and structural. Meanwhile, Meghan's legal team filed a sealed motion in California, likely seeking preemptive bankruptcy protections. This would block creditors from seizing Rock property, but also trigger disclosure requirements potentially exposing Archwell's internal operations. Harry, caught in the middle, was an overlooked casualty. Friends noted his unkempt appearance, confused public statements, and absence from Archwell live streams. Palace insiders revealed he had quietly reinitiated back-channel communication with Prince Edward, not as a royal, but as a brother seeking clarity. Rumours even suggested he questioned whether his children still counted as Windsors and under what legal framework their future was protected. By mid-February, Montecito no longer represented a sanctuary. It had become a monument to hubris and financial miscalculation. Meghan cancelled all media appearances, and her brand team stopped responding to press inquiries, posting only a vague statement on February 15th about rising again through grace and grit, garnering less than half the usual engagement. Meanwhile, the House of Windsor moved forward. Prince William toured youth centres in Kent, maintaining a steady, reassuring presence, while Princess Catherine, serene yet resolute, opened a new cancer rehabilitation wing in Nottingham, embodying the Crown's commitment to stability and duty even as turmoil swirled behind palace walls. The Crown had already pivoted its future, with every action, every word, and every decision meticulously calculated around duty, service, and the preservation of institutional continuity. The monarchy, at its core, was a living organism of history, protocol, and legacy. And in 2026, it demonstrated with brutal clarity that the survival of the institution far outweighed the ambitions, scandals, or narratives of any single member. Harry and Meghan, once celebrated globally as icons of modern reinvention, had found themselves not just outside the palace gates, but increasingly alienated from the public they once courted. Invitations evaporated, cordiality cooled into indifference, and the glowing international press they had once manipulated now scrutinized every move with relentless scrutiny. Their debts had shifted from merely financial to deeply reputational, eroding the aura of invincibility they had cultivated so carefully over the years. By the 17th of February, 2026, the British Royal Legal Council had completed its initial assessment of the 2018 marriage contract between Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. At the centre of this storm was page 14, Clause 7, a provision so sweeping in scope that it effectively redefined the boundaries of personal agency, legal rights, and public narrative control. The clause granted Meghan unrestricted editorial, creative, and financial authority over Harry's likeness, voice, digital presence, backstory, unpublished correspondence, and even his personal reflections on the monarchy. For years, junior aides and palace clerks had dismissed the clause as a standard American prenuptial intellectual property clause. Yet under the laser-focused scrutiny of Lady Louise Windsor, its true power was laid bare. It was a weaponized legal mechanism capable of controlling not just a public figure's past, but his present and future, with precision and finality. Between 2022 and 2025, Meghan's legal team had already leveraged Clause 7 to obstruct multiple Windsor media projects. A documentary narrated by one of Harry's childhood friends was abruptly shelved, a mental health campaign under the Windsor Foundation was quietly cancelled, and even a children's book that fictionalised a red-haired prince was blocked from publication. The clause loomed over Harry's professional and personal autonomy like a legal guillotine. He could not give interviews, release memoirs, or publicly comment on his life without Meghan's express written consent. In effect, she had taken ownership of his story, his public persona, and every aspect of his personal narrative. The revelation of Clause 7 sparked shock and fury within the palace. Princess Anne, reportedly in a private meeting at Clarence House, slammed the contract on the table, her voice resonating with palpable outrage. "This is not a marriage. It is a licensing agreement." While Meghan's advocates argued that the clause was a protective measure intended to shield Harry from media distortion, patterns emerged that exposed an undeniable imbalance. Meghan retained full commercial control, funneled through Archwell's elaborate LLC network into a Delaware-registered shell company named Echo Royal Media. The clause also included an automatic renewal every 18 months. Harry had missed the July 2023 renewal window, leaving him bound indefinitely, a silent observer of a narrative from which he had no recourse. Harry's emotional state had deteriorated under the combined pressures of grief, fatherhood, and public scrutiny. Emergency petitions filed in California courts seeking declaratory relief were met with stern admonitions from the judge. Harry had signed, benefited, and could not now claim ignorance or unilateral authority to void the arrangement. Privately, Prince William confronted his brother with a harsh truth, reportedly intercepted by palace insiders. "You let this happen. You sold yourself, and now you want the crown to buy you back." The accusation was cutting, precise, and uncomfortably accurate. Harry's choices, both emotional and legal, had created a vulnerability that threatened not only his reputation, but the broader institutional integrity of the monarchy. Meanwhile, Meghan's PR machinery sprang into action, seeding a counter-narrative to select media outlets. The story portrayed Harry as a willing co-signatory of a mutually beneficial creative arrangement. They cited scripted docu-series appearances from 2021, where Harry read lines written by external staff. Behind the glossy veneer, however, every edit, approval, and depiction had been controlled exclusively by Meghan. Netflix lawyers reviewing Clause 7 were reportedly stunned. The clause explained why Harry had never been allowed unscripted camera appearances. It did not merely govern his past, it constrained his future, rendering him legally silenced until formal nullification. On February 18th, Princess Anne issued an unprecedented order. All engagement with Harry's likeness and narrative was to cease until Clause 7 was legally challenged and potentially nullified. For the first time in modern royal history, a son of the crown had been declared institutionally non-viable, not because of scandal, moral failing, or misbehaviour, but due to the far-reaching implications of a contractual clause. Meghan's strategy was undeniably effective. She controlled not only the story, but the storyteller. Harry's silence was no accident. It was by design, executed through legal precision, leaving the prince powerless to reclaim his narrative. The palace dossier leaked on February 19th introduced an even more shocking development: the contingent custodial jurisdiction clause affecting Archie and Lilette. Neither child was officially registered in the Windsor family genealogical records. There were discrepancies in birth certificates, travel authorizations, and biometric records. Within hours, the Lord Chamberlain issued an addendum confirming that Archibald Harrison and Lilette Diana would no longer be recognised with any privileges, ceremonial roles, or protection associated with the British Crown. The decree emphasised permanent separation from dynastic records and reinforced ethical, legal, and national interest justifications. Public reaction was immediate and intense. Meghan's February 18th video, filled with lavish decor, half-burned candles, and a solemn monologue on the pain of silence, became viral, mocked across social media. The hashtag #GhostRoyals spread across Europe and North America, cementing the perception of her diminishing credibility. Montecito erupted into crisis meetings involving multiple US law firms, reputation management advisors, and Netflix executives. Yet the palace had moved decisively beyond narrative control. Lady Louise Windsor and Princess Anne coordinated with royal archivists and biometric consultants to erase the children's honorary profiles from Commonwealth registries. Ceremonial rolls, memorabilia, and licensing agreements were purged entirely, leaving no trace of Archie and Lilette's formal connection to the monarchy. Prince Harry, meanwhile, grew increasingly silent and isolated. Friends reported a visible decline, unshaven appearances, withdrawn public behaviour, and a hesitancy to engage with media or royal correspondences. He requested a private meeting with Prince William, not for reconciliation, but to confirm the security of guardianship transitions. Concerns regarding Meghan attempting an international relocation, now classified as custodial interference under new protocols, heightened the urgency of proceedings. By February 20th, Princess Catherine took the lead with a surprise public appearance at a paediatric community centre in West London. Her muted navy coat and rose gold shield-shaped brooch signalled Windsor Protection Protocol 12, invoked explicitly to revoke Archie and Lilette's royal status. When pressed on the matter of the children, Catherine stated with resolute calm, "Every child deserves stability, honesty and protection from exploitation. The Crown stands ready to provide that where necessary." Queen Camilla remained notably silent, underscoring the authority of the Charles-Anne-William axis. Public opinion mirrored these actions. Ipsos Mori polling indicated that 73% of Britons supported the full removal of Meghan, Harry and their children from royal affiliation, while 61% endorsed Princess Catherine's assumption of symbolic guardianship over future generations. This demonstrated a sharp public alignment with the Crown's decision to protect institutional integrity over individual narratives. Finally, at 11:59 p.m. on February 20th, 2026, the Crown Archives executed the final act. The Royal UK genealogy page was updated. Archie Harrison and Lilette Diana were removed completely, replaced by a single footnote acknowledging their former Sussex designation, excised per sovereign decree under Protocol 24/6 and P12 jurisdiction. The experiment had ended. The monarchy had survived intact. Meghan Markle, once celebrated as a breath of modernity and change, now stood alone. Her narrative fractured, her brand in ruins, and her ambitions of crown-adjacent influence decisively thwarted. The Windsor firewall had held, reinforcing that in a digital post-truth era, institutional authority, not celebrity, media spin, or personal ambition, remained the ultimate arbiter of historical record and public legacy. The story does not end here. These events mark only the beginning of a new era for the monarchy, one in which narrative control, institutional clarity, and public trust will be fiercely guarded against any individual overreach. For viewers following this saga, there is much more to come: future revelations, court proceedings, and public statements that will continue to shape the legacy of the House of Windsor. If you've been captivated by this unfolding drama, make sure to like the video, share your thoughts below, and subscribe to stay updated. This is the kind of story where every detail counts, every decision echoes through history, and every revelation changes how the public understands the monarchy. Stick around, because the next chapters in the Windsor story are only just beginning, and you won't want to miss a single moment.